I am your host of Across Generations, Tiffany Cross, and this is the only place where you will hear 3 different perspectives from 3 distinct generations of Black women, and I'm so thrilled to invite you to this conversation. Hi, everybody. I'm Tiffany Cross, your host of Across Generations, and let me just start by saying I'm not judging you, but she is. On today's episode, I'm sitting down for a one-on-one conversation with Judge Hatchet, better known to you all as Judge Hatchet. Now, she's the star of the former court show, Judge Hatchet, and currently The Verdict with Judge Hatchet. She's also a founding partner at the Hatchet firm, and Judge Hatchet is currently practicing at Stewart Miller Simmons Trial Attorneys. And I'm a little jealous because she was vibing out with Usher, apparently, and even got a private audience with him in his concert. So I have quite a few questions. We're going to talk about everything from how she handled a sheriff or somebody groping her to the most challenging parts of aging, which I want to know about, and what needs to change exactly in our criminal justice system. So let's get right to it. Judge Hatchet.
I'm thrilled to be here with you.
I am so thrilled. When they told me that we booked you, I literally yelped. I was like, are you kidding? I love it. So you're such a legend. One thing I didn't realize is you were the first Black woman TV judge. Did you know that?
I hadn't thought about that.
Yes.
You were, wow, yes.
You were a pioneer in that space.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate about it is you were an actually appointed jurist, not a caricature of a judge.
Right.
You were an actual judge.
Let's stress that, right? I was a real judge.
Yes.
And we can talk about that at some point, but that's why I refused originally. It kept coming to me, asking me to do it. I'm like, no, I'm a real judge. I don't want to play that craziness on TV. And so you
said no the first time.
I said no several times.
Really?
Several times.
Did you think it would diminish your career?
I thought it was not authentic.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that it was not befitting. Right? And so, I was just going to tell you now, but what happened is that a friend called up and said, Glenda, you've got to take this meeting. And I'm like, Nancy, I'm not taking this meeting. And she said, they know that you and I know each other, and I'm calling in a chit. You've got to take this meeting. And I took it because of her. And I took the meeting with Sony, and they said, what would it take to get you to say yes? And I said, I would have to develop this show consistent with everything that I believe in. And that was what made the difference, so that my show was designed so that people hopefully would leave in better shape than they came in. Now, it's real life, and that didn't always happen. So I asked for support in terms of social workers and mainly resources. So when I sent someone to drug treatment, Sony paid for it.
Oh, wow.
When I sent somebody for whatever rehabilitation, Sony paid for it. And they literally brought in the president of the studio in that meeting. He came in toward the end of the meeting, and he sat in front of me and he said, what would it take? And I just off the top of my head listed the things that I thought were important. And so that's why that show is very different, with the interventions, with the follow-up, with treatment. I've stopped in the middle of taping, Tiffany, and sent a child to the hospital, right? Called the ambulance to the studio and sent that child because it occurred to me that he had been sexually molested by his grandmother.
Oh, wow.
And I just stopped tape. Stop. Because I thought something about this is not right. Something, I've been doing this long enough to have known, because I was a real judge for a while. And I always tell people I was a mama before I was a judge, so my instincts kicked in. And so we would send like a child who came with her journal. And I'll make this short. She came into court with her journal, and she had 112 sexual partners.
At 12? Wait, how old was
No,
she?
she was 16.
She was 16 and
she
had
112 sexual partners. So I said, first of all, was this bluffing so-and-so? But she had kept a journal.
Oh, wow.
And so I stopped tape, And I sat down to look at the journal, and the journal was authentic because some of it was in pen and some of it was stuff that spilled on it. She had 112 sexual partners, sometimes at the same time, right?
Oh, wow.
So I sent her to South Africa, right, with our crew. I sent her to spend time in a village where there was an orphanage, where all those children were there because all of their parents had died from AIDS, right? As a wake-up call. I have sent her then, another girl in a similar situation, who was a prostitute, right? 16-year-old prostitute. I sent her out all night to spend on the streets of New York with Pommy. I remember her vividly, who had been a prostitute. And then she said, Judge, I want to tell her that I am HIV positive. I said, I can't let you go on air. Because, we do it in segments. We tape part of it. They send them off and then tape them when they get back, a few weeks later, a month later, whatever. And Pommy sat in my office in the studio and she said, Judge, I need to tell her my story. I need to tell her that when I was 16, I was doing what she was doing. And now I'm HIV positive. And I said, you can't. On national TV, I can't let you say that. So we delayed taping for another month or so, and I put Pommy into treatment, therapeutic treatment, for me to be satisfied that she was really at a place, because nobody knew. She hadn't told her family. She hadn't told anybody. But she took the young girl to a bridge in Brooklyn where the guy had thrown her over for dead.
Oh, wow.
Rather than to pay her after she had been the prostitute for him, and left her there to die. And so I took great pride in the fact that we did a lot of interventions in ways, we went in crack houses and pulled people out of crack houses. Of course, my camera people would say, oh my God, where's Judge sending us now? But it was raw and it was real because I wanted to use it as a way to help people. And the number of letters, the number of emails, the number of people who've stopped me on the street, whether I'm in New York or I'm walking down the street in a small rural town, in a grocery store, visiting relatives in Louisiana. Judge, I want to tell you my story. I want to tell you that I watched you and I felt that you were telling me that you were cheering for me too. And that's the power of television. So I go back to the original point. I didn't want to do craziness.
Yes.
I refused to. So when you say you had several people come to you before, I had.
Yeah.
And I refused to do it. And the reason I did it then is because Sony agreed to everything I asked them.
This is what I love about Black women. You did not take that show for you. You took that show for community. You were not trying to build your brand. You were trying to build community. Right. And that makes such a difference. And I think the marketplace, quite honestly, has changed so much. I was just telling one of our producers, because there was a woman who was a TV judge, like a web series TV judge, and she literally started referring to herself as like the honorable so-and-so, but she was never a practicing lawyer and was not an actual judge. And I just think when people traffic in that, it's self-serving. And you were community serving. You were living in service to us, and that makes such a difference. What do you think about the landscape? Because a lot of, I think
it's unfortunate.
Really?
I think it's unfortunate.
The TV landscape.
I thought you meant about the judges.
Well, I do. I definitely have a question about the judiciary. But in terms of being the first Black woman judge on television, I think you opened up a marketplace for that. And then there were other people who came along after you. Some of them were appointed judges. Other people, were just TV personalities. I'm just curious what you think about that, because I don't think we see that same level of seriousness across the board that we saw in your courtroom.
No, we don't. And I think it's unfortunate. I do. I think it's unfortunate. I think it is a disservice to the profession. And what I said when I started that show, you realize that this happened back in 2000.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking 24 years ago. And literally, I said, my name is on that show.
Mm-hmm.
My father's name is on that show. My ancestors' name was on that show. And I never wanted to wake up, Tiffany, and think, that it's a poor reflection. I don't want my children to see it and think, what is mom doing or whatever. So my point is that if you have a platform, and I mean this, and you don't use it for the good of the whole, then you don't deserve it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really, and I know people disagree with me about that, but I'm very clear about that.
You get no disagreement here.
I know I won't from you.
I
know that I won't from you. And so if you are, and I say the same thing about power, I might delve a little bit into that, about power, that if you have power and you don't use it for the good of the whole, then you really don't deserve power.
Yeah.
And if you are so busy trying to protect yourself and aren't willing to take risk, and there have been situations where I've taken a lot of risk, and I'd do it again. And people are like, you better not do that. You'll upset people. And this is long before television, because I have been the first in so many instances in my life.
Yeah. The first Black woman in Fulton County, right? Appointed judge in Fulton County?
No, there were other judges in Fulton County. I was the first Black man or woman to be a chief judge.
That's what okay.
Anywhere in the state of Georgia.
Wow.
Not just Fulton County.
Wow.
Anywhere in Georgia. There had never been a chief judge of a state level court anywhere in the state.
I want to talk about that a little bit, because we were getting into the state of the judiciary. And I think it is such a seductive topic in the country when it comes to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Like all lives stop. Everybody's looking at what's going to happen with the Supreme Court and who gets to appoint Supreme Court justices. But I think we have to start paying attention to these lower courts.
Absolutely.
And the dearth of Black women when it comes to those positions.
Absolutely.
So we should just say the former president, 45, I won't say his name, but he appointed over 200 judges, mostly white men, to lifetime appointments. It will take a generation to undo that. When it comes to Black women appointed justices across all courts, we are lacking in number. Curious your thoughts on that and why. Like, why does the landscape look that way?
Well, let's back up, because we see the numbers not on the bench of Black women in this country, but we have to back up to the pipeline. And let's just be real about this, about the pipeline of people coming into profession. And so the American Bar Association has done studies about the numbers of Black people, period, coming into the profession. So we have to start there. And so then that pipeline, we've got to get more people in the pipeline. But the women who are sitting now, we have far more than we've had, but not nearly the diversity that we should have on the bench. And it is going to take more presidents and U.S. Senates who understand not only the appointment process, but the confirmation process, and will value the fact that the judiciary needs to look like America. It needs to look like the country it serves. And that's not just the Supreme Court, but all levels of the judiciary, as well as local judiciaries. Yes. And so
some judges are elected.
A lot of judges are elected.
Do you support that? Judges being elected?
I do. And I'll tell you why, because, well, it's a two-pronged answer, and I'll make it brief. Two-prong issue. The reason I support that is because I do think that they need to be known by the community that they serve. But at the same time, we need to do a much better job of educating the community so that they understand who they're voting for and why they're voting for them. The same thing for district attorneys in all of these communities across the country, that we need to do a better job of educating people and then encouraging really good people to run for these spaces and to be in this space. Now, right here in Atlanta, Georgia, in Fulton County, we have a number of Black women on all these levels.
Yes.
Judge Miller is stepping down and retiring in the next couple of days. She's on the Georgia Court of Appeals. Not as diverse on the appellate level as we would like for it to be, but in the county courtrooms, we are seeing a lot more diversity and a lot more Black women, particularly in this metro area.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of work to do. However, let me be quick to say, everybody Black ain't your kind.
Thank you. Hello, Clarence Thomas. Yeah, we know. We are clear. And I think that's what people don't realize too. These appellate courts, that is the filter that gets to the Supreme Court. So if those courts don't look like us, a brilliant legal mind who I love, Elie Mystal, he writes for The Nation. But he suggests that the Supreme Court, I think he said they should have 30. He's all for expanding the court. He said, he wrote that they should have 32. I think if that's how many judges they have on the appellate courts. Or 27. Is it 27? I can't remember. But his point was it should look like the appellate courts, because then if the Supreme Court is like that, it will be hard to influence them. It will be hard to have a conservative court or a liberal court, because they would be chosen at random over what cases to preside over. You cannot get 27 or 32 justices to agree on anything, conservative or Democrat. And he thinks it would be a much more equitable way for the country to issue justice. I'm probably butchering this legal argument, but he does it much more articulately. A Harvard-trained lawyer does it much better than I can. But when he said that, I thought because we have to start reimagining America, all of its social infrastructure, all of the even the branches of government. We have to reimagine it. So I like that perspective as a non-legal person.
And I disagree with that perspective. And
Really?
I'll tell you why. Oh, absolutely. Let me tell you why. Because I don't want different branches of the U.S. Supreme Court hearing certain cases. I want the entire panel. All 9, all 12, all 50, however it ends up being. I mean, we got 9 now.
Are you for expanding the court?
I am for expanding the court. But I'm not for expanding the court to be like this mob.
A huge panel.
I don't want that.
Okay.
And
So
I
what
don't
would be
want it to be
appropriate?
like I don't think it should be any more than 12 or 13.
Okay.
I really don't.
Okay.
It has to be an odd number.
Yeah.
It has to be an odd number.
So 13.
13. 13 would be, for me, I think would be ideal max.
Okay.
But the reason I don't want it to be heard like the appellate courts, because the appellate courts hear cases in what we call panels.
Mm-hmm.
And so there may be 3 judges that will hear this particular case. I don't think that's appropriate for the Supreme Court. I want every one of them hearing the case and weighing in on it.
Yeah. That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, and that's what makes this healthy conversation. Different people have different perspectives about it.
Well, you guys are the experts. I am.
Well, I
have
don't
all
know.
the curiosity, not any of the answers. So I appreciate your perspective.
And I don't know that that's the right answer, but I think that is a perspective that's worth looking at.
Well, I think most people at this point, given this court, are for expanding the court. So I definitely appreciate that. I'm just asking this because it just occurred to me because you were out of Fulton County. Share whatever you like.
Yes.
Curious if you have any thoughts on Fani Willis.
I do.
Oh, perfect. So just for our viewers who may not be following the minutia of politics like we do, she is the prosecutor out of Fulton County. The main important point out of this that I want to remind our viewers and listeners is there is a recording of 45 saying, "Please find me 11,000 votes." This is a clear case of election interference. She was the prosecutor prosecuting that case against the former president. And there was all this hoopla because she had a relationship with someone on her team. So that's the quick background story. There's been a lot of opinions about it. And I'm just curious, as a fellow person out of Fulton County, your thoughts on Fani.
Well, let me, full disclosure, Fani is a mentee. She's a mentee, right? I have known her. I have enormous respect for her. And what I said on an interview on national television when asked about this is that I don't know of anybody better prepared to be a prosecuting attorney anywhere in this country on RICO matters. Mm-hmm. She's phenomenal, and she knows her stuff. And I don't know, I mean, there are people who have had experience, and I won't say she's the only one, but I will say I don't think there's anybody better than her. Let me say that. And I will go a step further. I don't know that there is anyone who would have been more tenacious in bringing these charges, not only against former president, but also several other people involved in that situation. And she got a lot of criticism because it took so long. But she took her time and she did a very, very thorough piece that she took to the grand jury. Now, have we been distracted by Nathan Wade and all of that? Yes. And do I wish that didn't happen? Absolutely, I wish it didn't happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it did. But that was not enough to disqualify her from that. And that's exactly the way the judge ruled.
Right.
What has happened now is gone up on appeal.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, that was the strongest case of any of the cases, either federal or state level, anywhere in this country, that could have really been successful in prosecuting Trump
Right.
and the rest of the gang.
Yeah,
Right.
which it made sense that they would pay keen attention to her. And I have to say, I hope we can play this clip, but the best response from her during those court proceedings where they acted like she was on trial, and she let them know, you're confused. You think I'm on trial, and these people are on trial for trying to steal this election.
Mm.
And the story became about that. And it's like, even the media failed us so much then because they focused on her. And every time you talk about this story, it should have included audio from Donald Trump saying, find me 11,000 votes, because that was the issue at hand.
That was exactly the court.
Right.
I was actually in the courtroom that morning.
Really?
So actually in the courtroom that day, it was important for her to see me.
Mm-hmm.
It was important for her to know that I was there and that I was there to be supportive. But she ran in. They were arguing that she shouldn't testify. Let's be clear. And I looked up out of the corner of my eye, and she looked over, and I mean, she ran and she looked at me and she kept running, and I'm testifing.
Yes, I remember that
moment. I am testifying.
I thought it was beautiful. I mean, you can't silence a Black woman who want to speak. You know, she said, "No, I will not sit here and muzzled."
So I think that I think we owe her respect, and I think we owe her a deep gratitude. And I don't know too many prosecutors who have taken this on.
Right.
I don't, because it really. Another thing we have to understand too about this case, not to get into the weeds, but in charging them under the RICO statute, it really does make it such that you have these other people who are tying in. And what people don't understand, Tiffany, often enough, is that there is no right of pardon by the governor in Georgia.
Right.
He can't pardon.
Right.
He can't pardon. And so if she's able to prosecute that case, there is no pardon, because this is not a federal case. It's a state case. And in Georgia, the governor cannot pardon and has not been able to pardon since the 40s. Right. And that's a whole nother history lesson we won't get into today. Yeah. But I have respect for her. I am constantly saying to her, stand strong, be strong.
We stand with her. Because there's something beautifully poetic in this country that the people who will bring this man to heel are Black women. You have Tish James in New York, the New York Attorney General.
Say that.
You have Fani Willis right here in Atlanta. You have the judge in the District of Columbia who will hear his case. Say her name again.
Judge
Chetney. And then you have, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris. One thing I love, too, in reading about you, maybe I knew this at the time, but it reoccurred to me. You represented Philando Castile's family.
I did.
When I read that, I'm like, oh my God, I don't know that stood out at the time. Right. So just a reminder, because sadly there were so many people who we lost, but Philando Castile was shot by an officer in Minneapolis. This was a case where he was pulled over. He was in the passenger seat. His girlfriend was driving.
No, it's just the opposite. He was
driving and the girlfriend was in the passenger seat.
And she live streamed it.
And this officer, Geronimo Yanez, I believe was his name, shot him. And so we sadly watched this man die. It was just awful to see, but it was in a string of other very unfortunate deaths. Let me not say deaths. It was in a string of other unfortunate murders.
Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
He was murdered.
So were you a part of the criminal prosecution or civil?
Civil.
Okay. And
Civil.
Whatever happened? Did they ever, I don't want to say that they see justice, because justice would be their son still being here, would be Philando Castile here. But did something happen?
Well, you're going to fall out of your chair, because what people don't know is that there had never been a police officer ever indicted in the history of the state of Minnesota.
Wow.
Before I pushed that. And I went, and so people say, well, you're on the criminal side. That's because I was pushing so hard for the prosecutors to do what was right. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, at the time, Loretta Lynch was Attorney General of the United States and cross-deputized a U.S. attorney to also come in and prosecute the case. The jury found him, the police officer, not guilty, which was very disturbing because there was no broken tail light. He shouldn't have been stopped. He was armed, and he said, "I'm armed," but it wasn't on him. It was in the glove compartment, and the guy just opened fire. And there was no way he could survive hollow point bullets that literally exploded his heart. And in my office, there's a artist did a piece out of ceramics where the heart is just open and exposed because that's how he died. But yes, I did do that case, and excuse me, and it was a push. It was a push because they didn't understand that this needed to happen. They did intellectually, but didn't know how to get it done because they'd never done it before. And that was really the forerunner to George Floyd, because by that time, Philando's case had already been done. And, but yes, I was on the civil side, and I still have a wonderful communications with his mother because I walked into their house, Tiffany. I'll never forget this. And I said, "I am so sorry about your son." I never said that again after that day because it was my son too.
Yeah.
It was my son too. And my son was with me. It was just hard. And I'm a very strong woman. I am a very strong woman. But when I had to walk into that morgue and pull his body out on that slab, and it was just ripped, 8 different shots, just ripped his body apart. He had been stopped 53 times in that. It's a suburb. It's not even Minneapolis, suburb, by the police. And so the good thing that came out of that is that the U.S. Department of Justice opened an investigation on the stops and the disparity and the racial disparity, because it's not just enough to win these cases. You have to have systemic change.
Right.
And you've got to have that done. But, he sat at home for almost a year on a paid leave, right? And
a vacation.
It was a vacation.
Yeah.
Right?
That's really, the frustrating thing about that is one, there is no justice. There is no justice for the Castile family. Justice would be Philando still being here. Yes. And two, we have to die in outlandish fashion to pierce the white narrative of what happens to us in our lives. We have to be the perfect victim. We have to conduct ourselves in the perfect way. Right. And the thing is, no matter what we do, we are still subject to violent whims of law enforcement or anyone who deputizes themselves and authority over you, which is a long tradition in this country. And it's just heartbreaking to go through that, which I'm curious your thoughts on as someone as a judge, because there are a lot of people who, I hate to make this specifically about Black men, but there are a significant number of Black men who have challenges with Black people, but mainly Black women being prosecutors, being judges, being a part of this system that harms them. Right. I don't want to deny them their humanity. Brothers, I understand how you can feel that way because this is a system that has harmed you. And all you see from a distance is y'all have crossed the line and gone on the side of an oppressive, unforgiving criminal justice system.
And that's a lot of the problem that Kamala's having.
Right.
Let's call it like it is.
With Vice President Harris, who is a former prosecutor. But the thing is, you have to remind them, prosecutors decide what charges to bring, if any. When these police officers fire off and use this as target practice, it is a prosecutor who decides to indict them. Right. When low-level crime offenses like weed and prostitution, they can decide, well, we're not going to spend resources on these low-level crimes. So I'm just wondering how we can bridge that gap with our understanding of the criminal justice system and what you think needs to happen to change, to really disrupt and eradicate this system that has caused so much harm.
Well, it's embedded. It's not going to change overnight. And there's not a magical bullet that's going to just fix it overnight. But I do think that having prosecutors, and again, going back to seeing who's elected in these communities, and it doesn't always have to be a Black person. It can be a very, very astute white person.
Yeah,
it can be
white person
who's aware, Hispanic. What I want
very Shrek type,
I want a human person in these offices making these decisions that you just talked about. Yeah. And so we have to pay attention to who's being elected. Let's start there. and then encouraging people and supporting people in these positions. So the system is, we know we have to also go back to what's happening with the prison system, and that there's such a disproportionate number of Black people, particularly Black men in the prison system. And that goes back to the juvenile court system too. Yeah. I mean, it didn't just start there. I mean, you've got to look at what's happening in the pipeline. And I know I'm trying to cover a lot quickly, but this is important. There was a study that said, by the U.S. Department of Justice, that said that in the year 2000, out of every Black male child born in the year 2000, 1 in 3 would end up at some point in their lifetime in prison. What do you think about that for a minute?
Wow.
And I talk about this in speeches and conferences all over the country. 1 in 3. 1 in 3. That's your son, that's your brother, that's your husband, that's your uncle, that's your cousin, that's your neighbor, that's your friend. These are not statistics. And what I have been saying is that is the projection, but it doesn't have to be our reality. And so what are we doing? What are we doing that really is putting a different floor under our children so that we are not then seeing? And that was the big thing that I was doing in juvenile court. And then I was building these relationships and programs all over the country, testifying in Washington, going to Washington and say, look, we've got to change this until we start really talking about this pipeline to prison. That's real, that we have got to change it. So instead of building more prisons, why aren't we investing more in Head Start?
Right.
Why aren't we there was an article this week talking about the number of children in Georgia who are homeless, who are coming into the system. What sense does that make? Because you are homeless, that you are ripped from your parents and put in foster care.
But how is that possible? Because the governor here is so what he would call pro-life. So obviously he cares so much about children. And obviously he leads this coalition of white Christian evangelicals who want to deny us agency over our bodies. So how is it possible in Georgia with all these quote unquote pro-lifers that you have all of these children in harm's way? It's rhetorical. Y'all got to think about that. But this is, Judge Hatchet, my frustration with this coalition that we're building with these voters, because it's like you all created this landscape. And now that it's cannibalizing, now that Frankenstein is coming for your rights and encroaching on you, Reverend Sharpton, our common friend, says this: you can't pull the knife 6 inches out of my back and expect a reward for it because it's still some inches in my back.
Right.
So when you say things like that, it frustrates because it's not specific to Georgia. The interesting thing about Georgia, in 2016, Governor Brian Kemp ran on anti-choice legislation. He called himself a pro-lifer. White women here outpaced even white men in voting for him. Which brings me to a question I've been wanting to ask you.
Okay.
I didn't even bring this full circle on purpose. It just came to me.
Okay, all right.
Because we're talking about agency over our bodies. Who would have the temerity to put their hands on you in a way that was not welcome? I read that a member of law enforcement groped you. I would love to hear that story. And I'm sorry that happened to you. I would love to hear that story and how you handled it.
And I don't want to be the poster child for sexual assault. I don't. I didn't want to. But if it had to happen, it's best that it happened to somebody like me who understands the law, knew what to do, and then had a community that supported me. Yeah. So what happened is I was at a reception. I was a reception of sheriffs in Georgia at their conference, their winter conference. And I was standing at a table and right here on the long end, and this man comes up who I did not know. I was introduced to him, Tiffany, as Judge Hatchet. And I was cordial, and I said, he told me where he was from Bleckley County. And I said, my family's from Troup County. I don't know where Bleckley County is. And he took his finger and he poked right there, which I didn't take offense. He said, in the heart of Georgia right there. But what he did next is that he then reached over, grabbed my breast, squeezed it, rubbed it, and said, in the heart of Georgia, I was frozen. And you know how you think, well, why didn't that woman slap him? Why didn't she kick him? I was absolutely frozen. I was there as the guest of a retired sheriff, Thomas Brown, my dear friend, who his back was turned to me, so he didn't see it. But the woman across the table got his attention. Thomas Brown had to literally go and pull his hand off of me and push him away.
Did this man look like us?
No.
This is a white man.
He's a white man from rural Georgia.
Oh my God.
From rural Georgia.
That is
I
so
was
mortifying.
The only Black woman in the room. He came up to my table uninvited, right? So he then said he didn't remember, blah, blah, blah. And then he wanted to apologize. And he said he was drunk, whatever. But you just have to wonder what really is going on with him. And then he left the country. He left the country on a missionary trip, right? When they were trying to find him to arrest him, right? And so it's just, the gall, how dare you?
He was a sheriff?
He was the sheriff, not a deputy sheriff. He was the sheriff of Bleckley County.
So you wonder, if a man like that is in a position of authority, how else might he have abused his authority? How many other women may he have groped? I mean, I just believe there's a racial component. Anytime a white man looks at you, I wonder, would he have behaved that same way with a white woman who's a judge?
I was the only Black woman in the room.
Right.
I was the only Black woman in the room. He didn't do it to anybody else.
Right. Who else got groped that night but you? Just the temerity of that. But you took action. You didn't just leave mortified. And look, I don't think anyone's asking, well, why didn't she fill in the blank? Like, what could you have done in that moment? But you did take action. So
I did press charges, and I thought I was fine. Mm-hmm. And this is important for your viewers to understand too. I thought I was fine, right? I'm a strong Black woman. I'm fine. And in fact, I went the next night to a dinner because I thought, I'm not going to let this man push me. And so I went with Thomas to the dinner the next night. So this happened on a Tuesday night. Wednesday night, I went to the dinner. Thursday morning, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't stop crying.
Wow.
I was a wreck. It's
humiliating.
Well, you know what? Because it was the first time in my life, in my adult life, that I felt powerless. Mm-hmm. And that how could someone make me feel powerless? Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to be a victim. I didn't want to feel like a victim. And in fact, it's very hard for me even now to refer to myself as a victim. Mm-hmm. I just, But I did file charges because it was important that I do that he be held accountable. It took almost a year for us to go to court. He resigned the morning of the hearing. He resigned because he wanted to hold on to his benefits and his pension.
Of course, yeah.
But he did enter a guilty plea. And when I stood up before the court, I really thought that I was okay. Very importantly, because I'm very transparent about this, that morning I woke up in tears and could not function. My assistant at the time, she had to get food over to the house. I couldn't function. I was in pieces. Mm-hmm. And I went into therapy that night over the phone. Mm-hmm. And it was important that I do that. And I say that to other people, you gotta seek the help. And I did. I did go into therapy. But then I'm standing in court almost a year later, and that's the first time I'd seen him, obviously, since then. And I was talking, and the tears just,
Yeah. But I think that's ancestral, too. Because you think about, like, all the times that Black women were subjected to violence in that way, sexual violence, being groped, being lusted after. Right. I felt that connection to your story. I felt that connection when Donald Trump talked about how beautiful Vice President Harris looked on the cover of Time magazine. He was like lusting after her. And it's like, yeah, that's not flattering. So, like, that makes us feel disgusted. It makes me want to crawl out of my skin hearing that. And I just, they behave that way when they are not outnumbered. He would not, if he was at the at Reverend Sharpton's National Action Network luncheon in New York, he would not have done that.
No, he wouldn't have done that.
If you were speaking at an HBCU conference, he would not have done. I don't care how drunk he claimed to be, he'd have sobered up real quick and thought twice about it. He felt like he had license to do that. That's disgusting. Shame on that man.
But the other thing too that again, I didn't sign up for this, but the number of women who've reached out to me, women who've stopped me. Yeah. I was at car dealership getting some stuff repaired, and this woman literally jumped out of a car in tears and just broke down and cried. Women who I have known who've said, Glenn, I've never told this story before, I watched the press conference and I just wept the entire time. I was raped 30 years ago and I never said anything. The number of women who told me that they've been raped, they've been sexually assaulted. And so they were saying, thank you for standing up for us. Thank you for taking a position on this. Thank you for holding him accountable. And so now I'm actually taking on cases in my law firm of sexual assault cases on the civil side because it's important. Yeah. Just like I'm taking maternal death cases now because my own daughter died needlessly after having given birth. Yeah. And so you don't ever know why you're in these situations, but I have to believe that I'm there because God has a purpose for me. And so I'm trying to honor that.
Yeah. And I want to say my condolences to your daughter-in-law. This was after her doctor, you described him as butchering her. This was a botched cesarean section that she had to have and bled out after her child survived. Thank God. Your beautiful grandbaby.
Who's now is 8.
Wow.
It's hard to believe it's been 8 years.
Wow. Yeah. But even that story is so familiar to Black women.
Too many.
Yes. Of being denied our care, denied our humanity, even in the medical profession. This belief that we can, carry more pain. We can stand more pain. It's just awful. Right. I've been talking to you a lot because I'm so interested in politics and your perspective on things, but I'm also just interested in this, I guess, guidance in life. I am in my 40s now and I'm navigating so many things. My face is changing, my body's changing, I'm perimenopausal. I feel like there are times where I'm just like super sad. I don't know why. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is perimenopause. Or I get nauseous lately. Just all these changes happening in my body and my mind. And I also feel like I'm being confronted with my own mortality. Like what is my legacy? How do I want to spend the latter part of my years in this like middle age? So I'm just curious from you because you're in your 70s. Looking at you can't tell. That's the thing with Black women. You never know how old we are.
I am 73. I haven't had a facelift yet. Wow. No, I don't plan to have a facelift. But I'm 73 and I'm very proud of that.
Yes, yeah.
I'm 73. I don't feel 73 yet.
Well, I was going to ask, how old do you feel?
I don't feel 73. I mean, there are days when I get up, my knee is hurting or my hip is hurting and stuff. No, I don't feel that. And people don't think I'm 73 because they go,
I would not have thought that.
Yeah. It's a guy came up. He said, well, I judge, if you don't want me to take you out, you don't have to lie about your age. And I'm like, I'm flattered. But that's how old I am.
Well, but literally, like, there's an age, like, how old does, I know you're
60.
You feel 60.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm 60.
Okay.
I feel like I'm 60. Yeah.
And so of your 73 years, what was the most challenging time in life for you?
There have been several periods of time that have been really challenging for me. My father died 31 years ago this year, suddenly. He got to the hospital at 9. He got there at 9. I got there at 9:30. He was dead.
Wow.
By 11. And then of course Kira's death. I always refer to her as my daughter and not my daughter-in-law. Have just been probably 2 of the most difficult times of my life because it's so final. They're never coming back, and particularly with Kira, with these 2 precious babies, and Charles was not yet 3, but very articulate, and they lived with me.
Your grandson?
My grandsons live with me because Charles was 19 months old when Kira died. So there's this new baby and a 19-month-old, and I brought them back from LA and said, you've got to come home to Atlanta. And so one night, and I'm a light sleeper, and the doors were open so I could listen out for them, and I heard him get up, and this is Charles Spurgeon Johnson V, and he came up and he said, Grandma G, do you have my mommy's cell phone? And I said, no, sweetie, I don't. And he said, I need you to find it because I need you to call and tell her that I want God to let her come home. Now, this is a child who's not quite 3 who is able to articulate. That's what you say. She's never coming home.
Yeah.
And it was unnecessary. So what I want you and people listening to know is that 84% of deaths and these maternal deaths are preventable. That's outrageous. Yeah. 84%. My son says, Mom, you have to look at it differently. That means we've got a lot of room to improve. And so it's hard. It's hard. So those were the most difficult times of my life, because my father was my hero, will always be my hero, very close to him, and just thought the world of him and still do. And his handprints are all over me. I mean, I know that so much of who I am is because of how he poured into me and sacrificed for me.
Yeah.
So to not, I mean, he was perfectly healthy. And then, and then he's gone. He's just gone of a massive heart attack. Didn't smoke, didn't do all the things, wasn't overweight.
Wow.
He was 70, I was 70, almost my age, 72. And
I don't know what's more challenging, if you have time to plan for it, you have to watch a parent die, or if it's sudden. Both are so heartbreaking.
I think they're so heartbreaking. I wouldn't have wanted him to suffer. I wouldn't want him to suffer. And I've dealt with that question in my own soul. And as hard as it was for me to lose him like that, I would not have wanted him to suffer.
Yeah.
I would not have wanted him to suffer. So those have been the challenging things. Now, professionally, I've gotten my ass kicked on so many different situations. When I left law school, I went to clerk in the Northern District Federal Court here in Atlanta, Georgia. There had never been a Black person, man or woman, to be a clerk. And I went to clerk for the first Black judge in the Deep South, federal judge in the Deep South, right? Well, come on.
Yeah.
I'm like trying to protect him, and I'm making sure that everything is just super excellent. And that's always kind of been the story, that I'm always there. I'm first. I'm getting my ass kicked. People don't think you deserve to be there. And I'm always trying to prove that I am a badass and I deserve to be here.
The quintessential Black woman story.
Right.
I think we all go through that. But you're doing that while dealing with other things, while raising 2 kids, while navigating your personal life, while maintaining a marriage, while losing your father.
Right.
All the things that we carry. What about your mom?
My mom passed in 2020 during COVID, not from COVID, but during the isolation of COVID. But she would have been 99 a few months later, and she had been still driving her hardtop convertible Lexus with the top down until she was 97 with her dark glasses on. So let's be very clear.
I love it.
She had been working on her pilot's license when she was 90.
Wow.
She was just, and I write about her in this book, the collection of memoirs about mothers. And I say with all due respect, she was truly the badass.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty amazing. But she would, she and my dad would remind me too. So I left the clerkship, and then I went to Delta Airlines. And they had never had a Black woman attorney, right? And I was the highest ranking woman of any color, Black, Hispanic, Native American, worldwide.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine when I'd show up in court.
Right, yeah.
I know I had to be the legal secretary. I had to be the paralegal.
Yeah,
I had to
somebody's
be
assistant, something. Yeah, of course you could not be.
Right.
Yeah.
I couldn't be the attorney. I couldn't be the attorney representing a global airline, but I never lost a case.
Right?
But I also worked my ass off. Because, and people would say, but Judge, that's not fair. I said, I didn't say it was fair. I said, that was my reality so that I could pry that door open for you. So just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Las Vegas, Corporate Counsel Women of Color. And now there are, thousands of Black women who are in-house counsel for different corporations, right? Yeah. And on the stage, I said, 43 years ago, I walked into Delta Airlines and none of you all were anywhere.
Right.
I was it. There was not
strength in numbers. There is strength and that is what it takes. That's why I say it's so important to build community, not brand.
So you want to know about headaches and perimenopausal?
Well, I guess I'm trying to figure. I'm 45.
Okay.
You're 73, so I won't do the math, but that's 30 something years.
Okay.
What do I
look forward to?
Yes. Like what do I need to brace myself for?
Okay.
What do I need to look forward to?
All right. So you need to make sure that you are investing in your health, right?
What's that mean?
Which is what I didn't do. And so I'm telling you to do it. So I would work long hours. I eat on the run. And I was in New York taping the show and literally ended up with pneumonia. I was in New Orleans speaking and then ran back to do the induction ceremony for David Wingfield. And, Dr. J was there. And of course, I'm just, chewing over him. And, and so I'm trying to put on a good face, but I was burning up with fever, right? And ended up with pneumonia. And I was so sick, my son had to fly to New York to bring me back to Atlanta. And I'm in the room that I grew up in because I was too sick to be at home alone. And I'm looking at the ceiling. I said, God, I know I've said this before, but if you get me off of this bed, I promise I'm going to do better. Mm-hmm. I said, I know I've said this before, but I was taking care of everybody else. I was running and doing for everybody else. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't taking care of me. And so that would be the first thing to pay attention. I always say to women, make sure that you are, keeping those annual mammogram and your annual physical and doing that, and take time for yourself. I didn't do that. I didn't do that when I was your age because I was so busy taking care of everybody and trying to save the world.
Yeah.
And I didn't do that. And I've only recently come to that. I think one of the saving graces is, though, that in 2005, I became a vegetarian.
Me too.
Good.
Yes,
good.
I stopped eating meat. Yes.
That's important. So I
love animal stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, mine wasn't philosophical. Mine was, I just thought I needed to be healthier. And so at 2005.
It is healthier,
it's major. Because, I don't think I'd be in this kind of condition if I hadn't been. So
you look fit. Do you work out?
Not as much as I should. But
you look like you work out.
Thank you.
Is that residual or are you just blessed with good genes?
I think a lot of it is genes. Because if you saw my mom and you saw the women in her family, I think a lot of that is just blessed. But I need to do my part.
Okay.
I need to do better. I used to bike, for instance.
Oh, nice.
I used to go out on the Silver Comet Trail. This is years ago. And that would just be my therapy. I would leave my phone, which is not smart. And I would just go and I'd bike for miles on the Comet. And then a woman was raped and killed. Oh, Jesus. And so my team was like, no. You cannot go out there by yourself. Because that would be my thing. I would just go. And it was like, of course, now sometimes I go so far out and then I get, oh God, I got to go all the way back.
Yeah.
And all the squirrels were wonderful on the way up. And they're like, if they come in front of me now, they're going to
get ran over. We had a peace agreement with the squirrels that they agreed to move out the way. And I don't know who violated first, but now they're like, go around. Right. Like, we're here too.
And I think there has to be some stuff that just makes you happy.
Well, what makes you happy?
I love long walks on the ocean.
Me too. I love long walks anywhere.
I love the water. I love the waves. I love watching the sunrise. Mm-hmm. I love watching the sunset. And now I'm in a place now where I literally wake up to the sun rising in my bedroom window. And I can go out in the back balcony and watch the sunset. For those are things that are really peaceful. And the time that I spend with the boys now. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of reliving baseball and soccer and swim team and you name it, I'm doing it. And then I take the two boys here to see their brother in Hawaii, and we go for 2 weeks every summer. And nice. Those are things for me that are just, and people go, girl, that was a wonderful vacation. I said, I have 3 little boys.
Yeah.
3 little boys. I mean, that is not a vacation.
Not at all.
We're on swivel, but for me, it is such a blessing to have them in my life.
Do you hang out with girlfriends?
So I have.
Are you married?
No, okay. I've been divorced for years.
Okay.
I've been divorced for 30 plus years.
Well, then how was dating in the 70s?
Dating is horrible.
Really? Why?
Because I don't think dating is horrible in the 70s. I don't. I think dating is horrible because it's me.
Say more about that.
Because I don't want to be with someone who wants to be with me for the notoriety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I do date, and I'm very quiet about it.
Of course.
Because I'm very private about it,
That's best.
Yeah. I don't, so you're not going to read about me in the tabloids.
Right.
You're not going to read about me and you never will.
Yeah.
Because my life is so public.
Yeah.
That my private life is very, very guarded.
It's special.
It's very special.
Yeah.
And that's important to me.
Yeah.
It's very, very important.
I want to say I'm disappointed to hear dating is horrible in the 70s because I'm not married either. And I just wonder, I think so many people, especially Black women my age, have kind of decentered romance. And so I'm definitely open to partnership, but I'm building a life right now that I'm so in love with.
Good.
That if a partner never comes, I'll be okay.
You got to be in love with yourself, and you
Yeah.
got to be comfortable with yourself. The women, I have seen women, colleagues, who are my age or a little bit younger, who are so desperate to be in relationships that they've lost themselves. And that's tragic.
That's a bad place to be. That is a bad place to be.
And then they don't understand why the guy left.
Yeah.
You know?
There is no you. There was no you there.
Right. There was no you there. And you became so needy and so desperate to be that you didn't take the time just to be you.
Yeah.
And you lost yourself in the process, and that's not good. But you also, you know, as you grow older, you also want to be sure that it's someone who appreciates you and is there to really support you and your empowerment.
Yeah.
And if they can't do, I tell young women this all the time, if they aren't committed to your empowerment, they got to go.
Yeah.
They got to go.
Yeah.
I don't care how fine he is, how much you think you're in love with him. If ultimately he is not supportive of who you are and supportive of your empowerment and wants to see you even soar higher, they got to go.
This is a shallow question, but when you said, like, you don't care how fine he is, like, my definition of fine has changed. So, like, if I saw somebody 70, I was like, oh, he's so fine. You know, it's like, oh, he's a handsome older gentleman. I was telling these young ladies, a guy who I used to date, and I asked them, like, do you guys know him? And they were like, oh, yeah, like, he's older, like, heavy. And I'm like, I thought he was so handsome to me. But the way that they talked about him, like, he was an older man and he was in my age bracket. And I thought, wow, like, and they were like 30. I'm like, he was 50. So, of course, to them, it's a t-shirt. I saw it on Instagram. I want to find it. But
this is funny.
It encapsulates how I feel. It's a t-shirt that says, it's so strange being the same age as old people. Like, that is how I feel. It's like age is catching. But to you, you might look at me like, girl, you don't even know. Like, my mom looks at me like, you don't even know age yet. But I feel...
You don't.
But this is the thing that scares me. I remember 25 like it was 6 months ago. So if I remember 25 like it was 6 months ago, that says to me that 65 is going to come like that.
It's going to come fast.
Yes. It's like the more we live, the faster time goes.
But to that point, a very important footnote, you know, I'm talking to you as a daughter here.
Yes.
A very important footnote is that you got to live it in a way that you don't look back and say, God, I wish I had.
Yes.
You know, that I do have regrets in my life. I do.
Like what?
I do. Like, for instance, my father tried to get me to learn how to play golf with him. I had 2 young children. I had a job. I'm trying to figure out this brief for this antitrust case. I'm flying all over, you know, I'm like, I was like, right? But I wish that somehow I had figured out how to capture that time with him, because I thought he would be here a lot longer for me than he was. I regret a couple of these crazy fools I dated when I was, you know, in my 20s. I mean, like, what the hell was I thinking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have serious regrets about it because, you know, fortunately, the one I thought I was going to marry, I didn't marry. Thank God and hallelujah. Help us. Jesus. Probably be in prison somewhere. Really, I would just be like, oh, Lord. I look back on that, I think you did what? You had what? You were what? You know. But
we all have that, I think.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Those
20s are for making mistakes.
Yeah, right. And so I think that it's, I think that what you want to do at 45, because you're still very young, and I know that you're at some pivotal places in your careers. You're thinking about new pieces and how you build on that and what doesn't work anymore and what you need to do, is that you don't want to then have a lot of regrets. Like, I can really look at 73 and say I have very few regrets in my life. Very, very few regrets in my life. You know, and that's the way you want to live your life. And also, you have to give yourself some grace. Now, I'm just learning that. And I don't want you to wait to be my age to learn that.
I'm trying. I'm learning that now. That's the hardest thing.
Got to give yourself, I didn't give myself grace.
Yeah.
You know, I just did not allow myself to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I give myself grace now. And I wish
How
I had
though?
learned that.
Like how? What does that look like? How? Because I'm trying to do that for
Okay,
myself.
so what I do is, first of all, I pray. I mean, I
Mhm.
start my day every day on my knees in prayer.
Mhm.
The other thing is I meditate, right? And I did it in law school. I started doing it in law school at the suggestion of a good buddy in law school because I was having horrible migraines, headaches. I mean, just like debilitating, couldn't function. And I didn't want to be on medication. And so I learned how to meditate. And then I stopped. And then I got busy. And then, life got in the way. And so I'm back at that place now where I'm making time to do that. So, for instance, my good friend and her husband and mother took me to Anguilla for my birthday this year. I mean,
Nice.
it was just like, just like, Linda, just get there.
Yeah.
You don't have to think about anything. And so that very small circle of friends is so important in your
Yes.
life. You don't need a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And when I was pregnant 1,000 years ago, a woman who had had a baby 3 months before I had, she said, Glenda, I have had to learn to live in the sunshine and to rid my life of weeds. And I write about that in one of my books.
Wow.
And I've often thought about that. That's what you need to do.
Mhm.
Because there are going to be some weeds. You just need to be like, girl,
Yeah.
I'm going to love you at a distance.
Yes.
Dude,
I'm gonna feed you with a long handled spoon, as they say. Yeah.
And my cousin had this sermon once, and I didn't think she could preach, so I didn't want to go. It's terrible. And she got in the pulpit. She's a whole different person. We were in Germany. She was stationed in the army. She's chaplain in the army. And I'd gone over to do a conference. Anyway, point is, she got to preach it. And this is what she talked about. There are people who need to stay on the porch. That when Lazarus was saying, they're saying, Jesus came too late.
Mhm.
Person's already died. And they say, oh, you're too late. You got to leave people on the porch.
Yeah.
There are only some people he let Jesus in the house.
Yeah.
That was her sermon. But there are some people who just don't need to be in your house.
Yeah.
They got to go. And so I am very selective. Very few people have ever even been inside my house.
Mm-hmm.
That's on purpose.
Yeah.
It's the energy. It's the energy I want to preserve in my space.
Yeah.
And I want to always then try to listen to how I can be of service. Because I think that's why I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm here to be of service and to empower and to inspire. I mean, that's what I think I try to do.
You have been here in service, so I appreciate that. You have inspired me, and I just love your life advice. I was telling you about my grandmother before this, and that's really what I am navigating here. Like every woman I meet who is an elder to me, who's a seasoned woman, I'm like, teach me, pour into me, because I just think Black women are oracles. And, I can be a mature person, I can be an immature person, but ain't nothing like just days spent on this earth. So the days that you spent on this earth, you have wisdom to share with us. And you've certainly done that today. So thank you so much, Judge Hatchet, for being here. I will cherish this time. My last question / request is, I know your home is your sanctuary, but I would love to come over and have tea or something.
Okay. All right. So we'll pull out some wine.
Okay, wine, even better. Communion.
You can have tea if you want, but we'll also pull out some wine if you want.
I'll have some communion with you. We'll do that. Thank you so much for being here. And I love this. My other request, I was trying to decide, do I want to come over or do I want this jacket she's wearing?
Well, this jacket was designed for me.
It's beautiful.
And there's a Black woman who did this jewelry. All this is by hand.
Beautiful.
And so, and then I do a lot of wear stuff on the show. That young Black artist died recently, and it just broke my heart.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so I try to support Black people.
Yes.
And I try to do that in ways that then uplifts them. So,
well, on behalf of the community, we thank you for all that you've done. And I just thank you for taking the time. It's been a delight to get to know you. And I'm fuller for the experience. So thank you so much. Thank you guys. I hope that you guys feel just as full watching at home or listening at home. Please drop us a comment, like, subscribe, do all the things, and let us know how you felt about this episode. I feel enlightened and just happier for having met Judge Hatchet. So,
and I practice law. People don't think I practice law.
Yes,
So
she still practices
I practice law, you all. I practice
Yes.
law. So I hope we'll post that, how to get in touch with me.
Yes, Judge Hatchet practices law. So if you do you practice everywhere here in Georgia?
I practice here. I practice everywhere.
Okay, so here in Georgia, if you need legal representation, you can reach out to Judge Hatchet. And the next time I'm in Georgia, I'm going for some communion at Judge Hatchet's house. Until then, we'll see you on the next episode of Across Generations. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Cross.